Why, hello there, everyone. It is that time of year again in which we vote for the Game of the Year nominees. They have just been revealed today, and so I wanted to share with you who I will be voting for, or I should say what I will be voting for, considering their games, and I will be explaining my reasoning as I go through it. Now, I did a video like this last year for the 2019 nominees, and it got a pretty bad dislike ratio. I'm assuming that's just because people disagree with my votes or my reasoning, or what have you, which is obviously perfectly fine. But I just want to remind you to please understand that there are several categories, and I will be voting in as many as I feel like I'm qualified to. And so it is very unlikely for me to vote in the same exact way as you might, or for anyone for that matter. It's very unlikely that two people would vote in the same exact way, so just please understand that and be aware of that. Anyways, I'm logged in with my Twitter account, but I think there's some kind of visual bug going on with their website. This website is really bad on mobile as well. I'm using the desktop right now, as you can tell. It looks like there's some kind of visual bug there, even though I'm logged in on Twitter. And also this graphic in the back with the Game Awards trophy sort of being silhouetted by the red light behind it, and the fact that it's in water makes it very reminiscent of the eclipse from Berserk, at least in my eyes. Just the fact that it's in water adds to it even more so. But let's go ahead and start. So first up is the Game of the Year. I already previewed these, so I'm not going to act super surprised or shocked when I see these. I'm just going to explain my thoughts on them. So I'm going to go through each of these. This is obviously the most big deal of all of the categories, right? Actual Game of the Year. Since now, whichever game gets Game of the Year awarded to it, they can slap Game of the Year on the box whenever they start making reprints of the game, which might increase sales. Honestly, I doubt companies care about the Game Awards too much outside of like being able to make announcements and stuff, which is obviously the main reason I would watch the Game Awards, is for new trailers and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual awards, I doubt the companies really care too much about that, because literally all a company would care about are actual sales numbers, right? And I doubt any of this Game of the Year stuff, the Game Awards stuff, really affects sales very much. But if one of them does affect sales, then it would have to be Game of the Year, because, like I said, they can slap the thing on the box that says Game of the Year Edition or Game of the Year 2020 or what have you, and maybe that entices some people to buy it. I don't think I've ever seen any kind of research if that actually does affect sales, but it definitely adds some prestige. And if I was a company, I would be proud of it, right? Obviously, you'd want to brandish it. Anyways, so I'll go in order here. Well, actually, no, I won't go in order. I will start with Final Fantasy VII Remake and Last of Us Part 2. I think that Final Fantasy VII Remake and Last of Us Part 2 can immediately get axed from having a chance at winning. Well, I mean, obviously all of these have a chance at winning since they're a nominee. But in terms of the two that are least likely to win, I would say FF7 and Last of Us Part 2, just because they are both too divisive and somewhat controversial that they would just not have enough unanimous support to win. So I think we can immediately disregard these two from winning. Animal Crossing's pretty interesting. I think it's kind of strange seeing Animal Crossing as a Game of the Year candidate. However, the game does sell like crazy, and so you can't really ignore buku sales. But I would suspect that because the game has such a casual appeal, that a large majority of its player base might not be the kind of people that vote on Game Awards stuff. And so I think Animal Crossing can also be excluded. So that just leaves Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, and Doom Eternal. So I think it might actually be kind of close between these three. But if I had to lock in one as a bet on which is going to win, I would say Ghost of Tsushima is the most likely that's going to win, just because I don't think I've heard a single bad thing about it. And a Game of the Year, in my opinion, should be a game that pretty much everyone can rally behind, something that has unanimous affinity. And Ghost of Tsushima, I would say, fits the bill pretty well. However, even though I think Ghost of Tsushima is going to win, my Game of the Year has to be either Doom Eternal or Hades. When I first played Doom Eternal, when I first played through it on Nightmare difficulty, I was pretty confident that that was going to be my Game of the Year. That was until I played Hades. which is very strange. It's a very big deal that an indie game like Hades is on Game of the Year, and I think it would be pretty well, relatively a monumental occasion in terms of the Game Awards, which in the grand scheme isn't really that big, but in terms of the Game Awards, it would be a pretty monumental occasion if an indie game won Game of the Year. So, the reason why I would maybe vote Hades over Doom Eternal is that even though I think Doom Eternal is a more solid experience and is better put together, obviously just because, well, it has budget behind it, first of all. Hades is much more inventive. Doom Eternal is a bit more derivative just because it came after Doom 2016, and Doom 2016 was already almost perfect, so they really only had to refine the formula a little bit to get something as great as Doom Eternal, whereas Hades is very inventive and groundbreaking for the roguelike genre. And so I have been putting many hours into Hades. I've been uploading videos on Hades. I also uploaded Doom Eternal videos when I played through it. But just given the nature of the genres, Hades is something that obviously I'm going to keep playing for longer with it being a roguelike. So, well, if I was just voting in Game of the Year category, I would vote Hades. However, I already previewed several of the categories, like I said, and Hades got nominated for quite a few things that I think I would like to vote for. Let me start that sentence over. I was getting lost. Hades is nominated for several categories, and those categories are categories in which I would vote for Hades. There, period. End of the sentence. So because of that, I want Doom Eternal to win something, so I'm going to vote Doom Eternal. I still may consider going back and changing this, but if I vote for Hades here, and then Hades wins Game of the Year, I think it might be more unlikely that Doom Eternal will get... I want both these games to get recognition. That's my point. You know, I want both of these games to get recognition. These are my two favorite games of the year, so I want them to both win stuff. So I'm voting Doom Eternal here. Okay, I'm glad that you can just vote and it doesn't take you away to a separate page, because if I'm remembering correctly, maybe I should watch my other video to check, but I remember it being kind of annoying last year in that when you voted on something, it would take you to a page and then you had to click back to the categories and then it would take you back to categories and you have to scroll back to your spot. Okay, so Doom Eternal is my game of the year. Best game direction. Once again, here's Hades here. So most of the time when I hear direction, I think of things like, cutscene direction, voice acting direction, things like that. But honestly, it's just any kind of creative, as they say, outstanding creative vision and just overall solid direction and innovation. So the fact that they say creative vision and innovation in game direction and design, I'm going to very easily give that to Hades, because I was already saying how Hades is pretty innovative in how it, well, maybe I didn't go this in depth, but Hades is much more innovative than Doom Eternal in that, obviously Doom Eternal isn't in this category, but my point is Hades is super innovative in the sense that it's a roguelike, but the way in which it tells its story is very interesting. Not only is just the overall artistic direction super solid and all of that, but it's sort of frustrating. I'm kind of annoyed at how groundbreaking it is in its storytelling, because the fact that you're always getting new dialogue, at least it seems like it. I only have 80 hours in the game as of recording this right now. So eventually the dialogue is going to have to get exhausted, right? It is a video game after all. But I'm 80 hours in, and I'm still getting new dialogue and new story stuff every time I do a run. And so it's kind of preventing me from recording runs off stream or just not recording at all. Like, sometimes I just want to play Hades without recording or streaming, so that way I can unlock stuff, so that way I'll have more stuff for the next time I stream or record. But then when I'm playing like these random runs not being recorded, I'm getting all this juicy story stuff, and I think, wow, man, I should be recording this because all this story stuff is just being played without it getting recorded. So it makes it extremely hard to make videos for it in terms of showcasing the story stuff. So that's kind of annoying, but honestly, that's the opposite of a problem, just because of how groundbreaking it is in terms of how it can tell a story like that with it being a roguelike. It's very interesting. If I wanted to talk more about it, I would probably just make like a separate video reviewing the game, but that's not what I'm doing right now. Best narrative. I think this one's a lot more straightforward than game direction, but literally I was praising Hades here in terms of its direction as... I was praising Hades' game direction in terms of how innovative its storytelling is, and so best narrative would obviously have to go to Hades as well. That might seem like these two separate categories are redundant, but honestly, game direction could be not just storytelling, but, you know, artistic direction or things like that. In this case, it just happened to be that my rationale for voting Hades as best game direction was because of its storytelling. Best art direction. Hades again. The game's art is just too good. I don't understand how Last of Us 2 is in here. It's not really that artistic of a game. I guess realism is a genre of art, but honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of hyper-realistic art because it's just a recreation of art rather than it being like a creative take on it. You know what I mean? That's probably a hot take, but you get what I mean. Ghost of Tsushima is very pretty as well, though, but I just have to give it to Hades for everything about it, just dripping with artistic ability. Gen Z did the art in it. Very talented. So I'm starting to feel more confident about my Doom Eternal vote as Game of the Year since I literally voted for Hades in the last 3 categories. So yeah, I definitely want to give something to Doom Eternal. Score and music. Both Hades and Doom Eternal are showing up here. But in this case, I'm doing Doom Eternal just because I do like the music in Hades. But I think the music in Hades is very, very much dependent on the rest of the game's atmosphere and is just very solidly part of the game's identity, which is a good thing for the game, right? But in terms of just isolating the music by itself, it's not really something I would want to listen to by itself. However, Doom Eternal music, I like listening to the music tracks from that just when I'm working on things. Like, I like listening to it like I would listen to other music by itself, right? Plus, it's Mick Gordon, so you know it's godly. And Doom 2016, I'm pretty sure Doom 2016 won Best Score in Music during the year it came out, 2016. So I think that it's pretty likely Doom Eternal will win. I'm pretty sure it's very likely that Mick Gordon will win Best Score once again. So I'm not voting for it because I think it will win. I'm voting for it because I think it has the best music, and by proxy, I also think it will win. So unlike Game of the Year category, in which I suspect Ghost of Tsushima will win, but I vote for Doom Eternal, this category just happens to both be the same. I think it'll win, and I think it should win. Best audio design. This one's a little tricky. I think I might want to go back to 2019 to see what they had on here, because normally when I think of audio design, so obviously they already have a music category, right? And so when I hear audio design, I don't think of best music. I think of sound effects, things like that, and that might seem weird. Like, why would you have a category for sound effects? But some games can use them very inventively. Like, I think sound design or audio design is the most important in horror games. Like Resident Evil 3, for example, because, you know, sound is a very big part of horror and what scares you. And if you hear something crawling around the corner, or sometimes if they use 3D audio and you can tell where an enemy is coming from, that's not just exclusive to horror games, but it just adds to it. I think of things like that. So not just, ooh, do the sound effects sound good, but does it actually add to the experience in some way like that? With all that said, all the games I see here, I don't really know if any of them used audio in an inventive way or in a way that adds to gameplay aside from it just serving as a sound effect. So I really don't know, but because I've already been praising Doom Eternal so much, I'm going to go ahead and vote for Doom Eternal again. Best performance. I think they could have gotten much better nominees here. First of all, I think it's kind of weird that they have 2 roles from the same game, Last of Us Part 2 in this case. I think they did... I should go back and check again. I know I keep saying that, but I should go back and check for the 2019 Game of the Year nominees. I know that they had I think they had the Mads Mikkelsen character I think they had Mads Mikkelsen on here for playing the character in Death Stranding. But Death Stranding had a lot of big actors in it with pretty big roles. And so I don't remember if Death Stranding had more than one nominee. If it did, then I guess there's already a precedent set for being able to have multiple nominees from the same game in this category. But if not, then I think it's kind of weird that they just randomly started doing that for Last of Us Part 2. Jin Sakai, I think he does a good job. However, Jin is not really that hard of a role. He's a very stoic character, right? So obviously the actor did a good job. I'm not criticizing him at all. I'm just saying that it's a very neutral, good, stoic type of character, which is really not that demanding of a character to play. Miles Morales, this game is super new, and so I literally don't even know. I would suspect that it's not that demanding of a role either, because Spider-Man's also just a very neutral, good type character. Although he's a bit more comedic than someone like Jean, right? So maybe if I saw more of Spider-Man and Miles Morales, I would be inclined to vote for him. I also think it's kind of weird that they have Hades on here, because I'm kind of worried it might be a bit unfair, because all these actors have to do facial capture, right? I'm pretty sure all these characters that do the voices, or I'm pretty sure that all the voice actors here are also the facial captures. I know that's not always the case. Like, for example, in DMC5, some of the characters in DMC5, they have one person for the facial capture, but then another person for the voiceover. And so it's really two people's performance. Well, I guess the voiceover is the performance, but you still have to credit the person that's doing the facial capture, right? I'm pretty sure Jean does the facial capture and the voice. Not sure about Miles Morales. Anyways, my point is, I think it's a little unfair for Hades, because all these characters have facial captures. And so if somebody's thinking of best performance, they might automatically think that there needs to be some kind of physical acting with your face and everything too, right? Whereas in Hades' case, it's just voiceover. However, with that said, it's still very talented, and Hades has a lot of voice lines. So, and I watched a video too. Supergiant Games has been posting videos about the production of the game, and they recently posted a video talking about the voice of Hades, and he actually does several voices in the game, and he has I didn't even know that he voiced that many characters. You know, I kind of assumed that they were all different people doing the voices. But this one guy, well, voice actors typically have a pretty big range anyway. But in this case, this guy that voices Hades has proven that he has a very big range, and Hades just has a very big presence, obviously being a super important character in the game. It is named after him after all, so I'm going to vote Hades here as well. Although in this case, it's not really voting for the game necessarily, it's voting for a specific person. Games for Impact. I always think this is a very poorly defined category. It's usually full of just super artsy games, this case being no exception, and I've literally not even played any of these, so I won't vote. Best ongoing. I'm surprised League of Legends isn't on here. I'd like to vote for that. I'm not really particularly fond of any of these, so I will just pass that one up as well. Best indie game. So, with all this talk about Hades, even though I already mentioned that Hades was an indie game, so if it wins Game of the Year, I think it'll be the first time an indie game wins Game of the Year. But with all this talk about Hades and all of its nominations, it's sometimes easy to forget that it is an indie game. So, honestly, if I've already voted for Hades in all these other categories, and if I even considered voting for Hades in Game of the Year, you would assume, okay, then it would automatically make it the best indie game this year in my mind as well, right? Well, technically, yes. However, I really like Fall Guys, and I've already been voting for Hades in several categories, and Hades is probably bound to win at least a few things this year. And like I said at the beginning, my main goal is to just give recognition to games I like. Fall Guys was actually a really nice surprise this year. And in my mind, I think, even though these are both technically indie games, I think of Fall Guys more as an indie game. I mean that as a compliment to Hades. Hades is so good that I don't even think about it as an indie game, even though it technically is. Whereas Fall Guys is very much an indie game, as in it feels like an indie game in addition to being one. So I'm going to vote for Fall Guys. I haven't played Season 2 yet, though, but it looks pretty nice. But I'm voting for that. Best mobile game. Don't really care about mobile games. Now, the reason Among Us hasn't shown up in other categories yet is because even though Among Us sort of blew up in popularity this year, Among Us did not come out this year. I think it came out a couple years ago, and then it blew up recently because some big streamer or YouTuber started playing it. So the mobile port came out this year, so I think that's why it's technically making its way on here. So that's probably going to win just by means of popularity. I've not played any of these and don't particularly care to, just because, like I said, not much of a mobile game guy. I like Teppen, though. I like Teppen, and a long time ago, I liked Jetpack Joyride. So I would say those are the two mobile games I like. Best community support. So whenever I read this, I'm a bit confused because I think, wait, are you voting on the community of the game? Like, are you voting on the fans of the game that are giving it positive feedback, or are you voting on the developers which are listening to feedback? So recognizing a game for outstanding community support, transparency, and responsiveness. So this, yeah, and inclusive of social media activity and game updates patches. So this would entail the developers or the publishers having clear communication with the fan base and updating things in a timely manner, etc. So I'm going to give that to Fall Guys, even though I'm still waiting on them to fix that awful input lag on PS4. Even though I'm waiting on them to fix that. They have been constantly updating the game, and when the game first came out, it was so much more popular than they were expecting. They were having to constantly shut down the servers for maintenance, but they would always let people know ahead of time on Twitter that they were going to shut it down for maintenance, and they would always say what time they were going to do it. And it would always be, at some obscure time of night, even though people were still playing at that time. Maybe even myself. They definitely put in a lot of they were definitely putting in a lot of priority to help maintain the servers and fix bugs and ban cheaters, because that wasn't much of a problem on PS4, obviously, but on PC, there were a lot of cheaters and hackers, and so they made a good effort to shun them and ban them. So Fall Guys, definitely getting the vote for this one, even though I'm still waiting on them to fix the input lag on PS4. Not going to forget about that. Best VR AR game. Still don't have a VR thing. Okay, yes, I know what I voted for. Thank you for telling me now, of all times. Best VR AR. I don't have a VR, or are any of these games AR? These are all VR, right? Actually, I'm going to vote for Dreams. I don't have a VR headset, so I can't really vouch for any of the game's VR elements. However, Dreams doesn't even have to be played with VR, and I think that game should get more recognition. There are a lot of talented works in it. For anyone that doesn't know, it's basically a game design engine, so lots of people can make games in it. So I want the people that are making games in it to get recognition, hence why I'm voting for it here. Innovation and accessibility. I think this is probably the worst category this year, not because the category itself is bad, but just because these nominees make absolutely zero sense. Recognizing software and/or hardware that is pushing the medium forward by adding features, technology, and content to help games be played and enjoyed by an even wider audience. So I always think when I hear this category of accessible control schemes or things like that, when the Wii came out, obviously that's a console, not a game, but with motion controls and stuff, that would be innovation and accessibility. Like it or hate it, love it or hate it, it can be statistically proven that it increased accessibility because of the giant influx of casual gamers during the Wii era. So that's what I think of when I hear accessible. Also, Xbox made that one super moddable controller for people with disabilities, and so I would think of things like that, or maybe like Kinect games where you could voice command certain things. Obviously, that's kind of jank, but what else are you going to include when you think of accessibility? In the Game Awards case, these games, which make zero sense to me, because maybe I just haven't seen enough of these games, but I don't know how any of these do anything to increase accessibility. Maybe someone watching knows more about it. If anybody has an idea of why any of these games got nominated for Accessibility, please explain because I would love to know. Best action. This has always been a category I have not liked because best action is so vague and they usually throw so many different games in here. Like, I remember when Mega Man 11 was nominated for best action game and it was having to go against like Call of Duty or something like that. How are you going to put a low budget action platformer in the same category as a first person shooter? Speaking of first-person shooters, it looks like Doom Eternal is going against Hades again, but this makes no sense in this category because Hades is definitely an action game. Yes, it's a roguelike. Yes, it has RPG elements, but at its core, the gameplay is very much an action game. It's like an action RPG. Streets of Rage 4, Neo 2 are definitely action games as well. Streets of Rage 4, I always think of beat-em-ups more as like fighting games, but they're not a fighting game, so literally, I guess they just have to default to action. Half-Life Alyx, that's the VR game. I've only seen bits of it. It didn't really ever come off to me as an action game. It's technically a first-person shooter, and even then, there's not really much shooting in it from what I've seen. So, Half-Life Alyx and Doom Eternal, even though I love Doom Eternal and I want to give it attention, I don't think first-person shooters should ever be included in the action category. So that would leave Neo 2, Hades, and Streets of Rage 4. I have played all of these games. I played all the betas. I played the beta for Neo 2 and then the demo. So even though I haven't played the game itself, I have a very clear grasp on what the gameplay is like, and it actually is very good. It's made by Team Ninja, so it's no surprise the combat's good. Neo has always been an alternative to Dark Souls that has better combat but worse level design. So Dark Souls is amazing for its level design, but the combat is never the selling point of Dark Souls, whereas it's the inverse for Neo and Neo 2, because in Neo 2, the selling point is the combat, not the environmental design. Environmental design is in like the actual level design. I'm not talking about the art. I really like Streets of Rage 4 as well, but Hades is definitely the most action-y action game here. And the gameplay itself of Hades is actually perfect. All the problems I have with Hades are more so related to the progression and how long it takes to unlock everything in the game. But in terms of the actual gameplay, everything is fine-tuned perfectly. And the gameplay in Doom Eternal is fine-tuned perfectly as well. But like I said, I'm not voting for a first-person shooter in the best action category. I think they should stop including games like this in best action. So voting for Hades there. I'm going to go back afterwards and see how many times I've voted for Hades. Best action adventure. So why would we have a best action category and a best action adventure category? See what I mean? These categories, I think, should be rethought out, reworked in some way. I'm surprised that... See, originally when I saw that Miles Morales was not included on Game of the Year, I was thinking that was because it came out too late in the year, right? I mean, the game's super new. It just came out with the PS5, so I was thinking that it missed the window. But the fact that it's showing up in these smaller categories is proving that it wasn't too late to be nominated for Game of the Year. So I think it's kind of weird that it's not nominated for Game of the Year. Maybe it's because not enough of the jury played it, but in that case, isn't that reason for letting it roll over to the next period? So I think Miles Morales is sort of getting an unfair treatment in this Game Awards event just because of how no one really has played through it yet. This action adventure, though, I see they should not put a platformer in action adventure. Again, Ori is getting unfair treatment here as well. I'm going to put Ghost of Tsushima here, even though it's probably going to get Game of the Year, but if it doesn't, I'd like it to get something like this. And just overall, when I think of action adventure, Ghost of Tsushima is definitely like an adventure game, right? Whereas Ori's a platformer. I guess this would be another pretty good example of like an action adventure. Not really voting for Last of Us Part 2 for anything, just because I'm really not a fan of the game's direction. Best role-playing. Final Fantasy VII Remake is probably going to win here just out of sheer popularity. I don't know, maybe Persona 5 will, but I'm not going to vote for Final Fantasy VII Remake at all because I'm really not a fan of how Square Enix is trying to push the narrative that turn-based combat is outdated. It's not outdated. it's just a different genre. And so it's very weird and kind of sad to see the pioneers of JRPGs to shun its roots. I'm really not a fan of it. Final Fantasy 16 is looking amazing as a game, but as an RPG, definitely not. However, it's been leaked that they poached the combat designer of Devil May Cry, and so you can bet that they are definitely going to take advantage of that asset by making Final Fantasy 16 super action-focused. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad decision, but I'm not going to vote for a real-time combat game in a best role-playing category because that's barely RPG. Yeah, it's probably technically an RPG because it has RPG elements, but if you're going to vote for something in best role-playing category, it should be very much an RPG, which would be both Persona 5 and Yakuza. Wasteland 3 is more like a CRPG, so I think that should get some more recognition. I heard that's really underrated, and I watched some stuff for it. Genshin Impact is also real-time combat, so I'm not going to even consider voting for that on the same grounds as Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yakuza Like a Dragon has been out in Japan for a bit. However, just like Miles Morales, it has not been out for a very long time in the States, at least. And so I feel like that might be a bit unfair for it. It is a turn-based game because Yakuza recently switched to turn-based combat. So logically, I would like to vote for Persona, but it might be a little bit of paranoia, but I feel like if I ever try to support Persona in some way, it'll sort of detract from Shin Megami Tensei, which I enjoy way more. So I'm actually going to vote Wasteland 3 here just to give CRPGs some representation. Best Fighting. It's kind of a weird category to have for this year because not really many fighting games came out this year. All the big fighting games that are around right now came out before this year. Like, for example, it's kind of strange that Mortal Kombat 11 and Street Fighter 5 are on this because they obviously did not come out this year, but the Game Awards are counting MK11 Ultimate as a new entry and Street Fighter 5 Champion Edition as a new release. So even though technically Street Fighter 5 and MK11 aren't new, they are counting these versions as new because they came out this year. So normally that would rub me the wrong way, but like I said, there haven't been many fighting games to come out this year, so I guess they just had to do that. Under Night, honestly, is the best fighting game on this list. Just mechanically, Under Night is by far the best fighting game on this list. However, it's super niche, and so it probably has no chance of winning. It's probably going to be either MK11 or Street Fighter 5 just because of name recognition. Probably MK11 because Mortal Kombat is more popular than Street Fighter, right? But both Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat are sort of household names in terms of name recognition, at least. But just as a fighting game player myself, I have to vote on what I know is mechanically the best fighting game here. Best family category. I think that the jury misunderstands this category a lot as well. For the best game appropriate for family play, irrespective of genre or platform. So when I think of a family game, I think of couch co-op, couch multiplayer, things like that. Like Mario Party is the best example of what I'm describing here. None of these games here, well, except maybe Mario Kart Live. I'm going to get to that, though. None of these games here are any kind of couch co-op or anything like that. I can kind of see Animal Crossing because it's on the Switch. So, like, if you have more than one family member with a Switch and they both have Animal Crossing, you can visit each other's towns and stuff like that. So, I think Animal Crossing sort of makes sense here. And I will get to Mario Kart Live. But in terms of Crash, Fall Guys, Minecraft Dungeons, maybe that has co-op. It might actually have couch co-op, but I heard the game's actually super dry and not even that. It's like it's trying to appease Diablo fans and Minecraft fans, and so it falls in sort of this limbo between the two and ends up not really pleasing anyone. And I watched some gameplay and it looks super dry. So maybe that has couch co-op, in which case it would at least fit the category. So I guess I can't talk badly about that one. But Paper Mario, Fall Guys, Crash, these are single-player games. Also, Crash Bandicoot is not an easy game. Crash Bandicoot is pretty hard, so I can't see a family getting around the table and saying things like, "Okay, let's sit around little Jimmy and watch him rage at Crash 4." That's not really a family game. If you're going to rage at Crash, you're going to do it on your own time. But anyways, Mario Kart Live is actually super, as weird as Nintendo is, as weird as Nintendo's decisions sometimes are, they're definitely creative. You can never say Nintendo is not innovative, at least. Mario Kart Live, I don't have it myself, but so many funny videos have come out of it, specifically from people with like cats, things like that. You know, you drive, for anyone that doesn't know what this is, you're basically driving these remote Mario Kart cars around in your house, but you set up this track and there's a camera on the remote controlled car, and through the lens of this camera, it's doing augmented reality. And so the basis for the track is, you know, the route through the house that you've routed, but it has all this other stuff in it, making it like a video game. It's an AR game. Hey, hold on. If this is an AR game, why is it not in best VR AR? Surprised I didn't catch that earlier. Okay, that's weird. That's Mario Kart Live is literally like the best example of augmented reality, and it's not on this list, but whatever. But anyways, even if you're not necessarily playing this game with another person, if you are just, you know, driving the car around your house with other family members in it, and they are part of the track, and they see the cars go by, and they could like put their foot down to sort of make a roadblock or something, that is still involving them in a way, and it sort of involves them in a much more meta way than just couch co-op. So I think that this actually deserves the vote big time here. Best simulation / strategy. I have not actually played any of these. However, I really like XCOM, and so I've seen some footage of XCOM Chimera Squad, and it just seems like more XCOM, not super inventive, but I love XCOM and I love the formula, and it looks like more of that, which is good. However, Gears Tactics, even though it falls under the Gears of War IP, is definitely part of the XCOM formula. So I would, if I played both of these, I would vote. If I played every game on this list, I know I would end up voting for Gears Tactics or XCOM. But I don't know which one's better necessarily, but I'm going to go with XCOM just for name recognition because I like XCOM and I have no investment in the Gears franchise at all. Best sports / racing. None of these are racing games or sports games I would play. I like arcade racing games. Hot Shot Racing came out on Steam. They didn't include that at all. I guess that was too small. Best multiplayer. I'm going to say Fall Guys. Just a really nice surprise. And you can... obviously, the most common multiplayer games I've been playing are fighting games. However, in Fall Guys, you can actually have, you know, you can team up with, well, you're not really teamed up, but you can group up with 3 other people. So you're in a group of 4. So, of all the multiplayer games I've played this year that involves more people than it just being a 1v1 like a fighting game, Fall Guys is definitely it. I bet Among Us might actually win this, though. I think this would be a pretty close toss-up between Fall Guys and Among Us. This might be one that'll be interesting to see when they reveal it. Best Creator of the Year. They could have done... I think they could have done better choices here because the only person I really know here is Alana Pierce. I know of Tim the Tatman. I don't watch him, though. I think he's the guy that literally thought you could dig a hole straight down and reach the ocean. So, that's a little unrelated, though. Well, not really. Anyways, I've heard of Nick Merckx. I have no idea who this is. Like I said, I think there were way more creators they could have done. I think these are just... they probably go for the most popular people just because it's a very safe pick. And when it comes to, like, super popular content creators, I don't really watch many of them. I'll vote for Alana Pierce, though, just because she's the only one here that I have a somewhat positive opinion of. Best debut game. This is always an interesting category. The 2 games I know about the most here are Carrion and Mortal Shell. I don't think I want to vote for this category, though, just because I haven't played any of these. And Mortal Shell looks pretty cool, but it's super derivative of Dark Souls. Carrion, I bet if I played all of these, the one I would like the most is probably Carrion. So I'm a little bit inclined to vote for it, but I haven't played it, so I think I'll pass on that. Okay, so we're on the esports stuff now. I have not really kept up with, well, outside of fighting games. I watch fighting game esports stuff now, right? But I don't think they're really going to give that any recognition. So in terms of like the bigger esports stuff, I haven't really watched any esports stuff like that since I stopped playing League of Legends. But when I was playing League of Legends, I watched League stuff pretty often. So I'll probably just vote for one of the League of Legends people here just because League of Legends is a way better esport than Call of Duty or CSGO. At least just, in my opinion. Again, these are my opinions. I don't know these players though, so I'll just eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm sure they're both amazing players, obviously. Esports coach. Sorensen is the only coach here that I think I know of. I don't know why I don't remember these league coaches. I'm not going to vote for that though, just because I'm not familiar enough. This esports event. This is kind of weird this year because so many, several events got canceled because of the pandemic. Like, normally Evo is always on this list, right? Even though Evo is pretty small compared to esports events for, League of Legends and Call of Duty, it's still the biggest fighting game esport event of the year, and so it usually gets included here somehow. So normally I always vote for Evo, but since it's not here and there's no fighting game representation, I'm going to vote for League of Legends event just because I actually like watching League of Legends as opposed to these other games. Also, I think, I've said this before, but I don't think Overwatch is a very good esport. Call of Duty and CSGO, I know objectively are good esports, but I just personally don't care about it too much. In terms of Overwatch, I think that it's actually just objectively not a great esport compared to something like League of Legends. But I can elaborate that on. I've elaborated on that before. If anybody wants an explanation, I can make a comment or something like that explaining why. Best esports game. Literally already said League of Legends is my favorite non-fighting game esport. It's my favorite sort of traditional esport, if that's even a term. You know what I mean. What the? That was weird. The window flashed. Esports host. Golden Boy's the only one here I'm super familiar with. Well, actually, I'm not super familiar with any of them. I mean, he's the only one that compared to the other ones, I'm super familiar with him, but he's the only one I'm somewhat familiar with. But I don't think I'm familiar enough to vote. Best esports team. I'll just vote for one of the league teams. I know I said I didn't know much about these guys. I think one of them belongs to this team, though. And so if this team already got some representation with the player, I'll vote for G2 Esports here. I think that's the last category. Yeah, it is. Okay, they always put the esports stuff last because they probably know that not as many people are going to be invested in that sort of thing. So it makes sense that they put the most relevant stuff at the very top. So let's review over this again before I give my last thoughts. A lot of categories. What the heck? Doom Eternal. Once again, sort of torn between Hades and Doom Eternal, but Hades got nominated in so many categories, and I want to give both of my favorite games of this year recognition, so I'm voting Doom Eternal as my game of the year. Best game direction, Hades, super solid art direction and audio direction and just overall direction in terms of its storytelling and everything. Best narrative, Hades, not because the story itself is anything groundbreaking per se, but it's the presentation of the story, and more so specifically how they present this story in a genre which has traditionally always been seen as a genre that is pretty much devoid of story outside of normally in roguelikes, any kind of story that happens in roguelikes has already happened before you start playing the game. And then each time you play the game, you're basically doing the same story premise over and over. Whereas in Hades, every time you do a clear, even if you die, that is canonically happening in the story, and so it's just very inventive in that case. Best art direction, obviously Hades. You can literally just tell from the little thumbnails here that they give, that this picture of Zagreus is super artistic compared to these other ones. Not that these aren't art, but you know what I mean. This is more artsy. Ori is pretty artsy too, but I've played Hades way more. Obviously, I haven't played Ori. Plus, there have been other Ori games, and so they're pretty much using the same sort of character designs and everything, whereas Hades is new. Score and music, Doom Eternal. Mick Gordon music, amazing. I actually prefer the soundtrack in Doom Eternal over Doom 2016. I know there was a bit of a controversy in that Mick Gordon wasn't able to mix some of the tracks in Doom Eternal because there were deadlines. Obviously, I mean, making a game, even though it has art in it, is definitely a business thing. A business expenditure, right? And so you have to have deadlines for things. And Mick Gordon, he's just so good. You know, he's probably a perfectionist, and he wasn't able to finish things on the deadline. And so they just called in some other guy to do the mixing for the last few songs that needed mixing, so that way they could get the game out there in time. And then obviously Mick Gordon, you know, would want to go back and mix his stuff. I think I should look into what the situation is with that, because I know that there was sort of a fan petition to get Mick Gordon to mix the tracks he never got to mix for when they released the soundtrack as like a vinyl. I think that might have actually gone through, so that would be really cool if the official soundtrack that you can buy has all the tracks mixed by Mick Gordon. I think that would honestly be the best situation. However, even though he didn't mix all the songs in the game, they were still composed by him, and so they're still amazing. He's just being a perfectionist, you know, which isn't wrong, but honestly, it's such a minor difference. The music in the game is so good. My favorite music track in Doom Eternal, I would say, is the music that plays when you fight the Doom Hunter. It's probably my favorite track in the game. However, I think the reason why I like this more than Doom 2016 track is because the Doom 2016 track had like a few songs that I really liked. However, in Doom Eternal, I really, really like all of the songs in Doom Eternal. So it just overall has more consistency. And by consistency, I mean in terms of like the percentage of songs I like. Audio design, Doom Eternal, just because I think that none of these games really fit the category very well, and I already like Doom Eternal, so that's sort of a loosely voted one. This is literally just voted for game affinity. Like, this would be just a popularity contest for me here. Best performance, Hades. The guy's voice range is pretty big, and Hades just has a very huge presence in the game. Didn't vote for that. Surprised the League isn't here. I guess wouldn't Fall Guys technically be ongoing too? I guess they wouldn't put that on here since it came out this year, but next year, if they're still updating Fall Guys by next year, then that would give it credentials for being in the best ongoing category. Best indie game, even though Hades would technically be the best indie game in my mind, I want to give some attention to Fall Guys because I've already voted for several things for Hades. Skipped mobile games. Best community support, Fall Guys, even though I still want them to fix the input lag on PS4. Best VR AR, I voted for Dreams just so that game gets more attention. Skip that because I have no idea how any of these fit the category. Best action, Hades, because on this list, like, it is the most action of all of these games on the list here. Best action adventure, Ghost of Tsushima, because out of like all the more adventure-y games, this would be my favorite. Best role-playing. I gave it to Wasteland 3 just so CRPGs could get some recognition, and I wanted to vote against the real-time combat RPGs. Best fighting, Under Night, because it is mechanically the best fighting game on this list, even though Street Fighter or MK11 will win. Mario Kart Live for best family, even though, you know what, this should also have been in the best innovation in accessibility. Mario Kart Live Home Circuit should have definitely been in both the innovation in accessibility category and also the VR AR category. So that game got done dirty by not being in both of those. I voted XCOM for strategy just because I like XCOM. Skip that. Fall Guys for multiplayer. Lana Pierce for content creators just because I don't think this is a great... Not throwing shade against any of these people, obviously. I just think that they probably could have picked people that more people like myself would be a bit more excited to vote for. Best debut game, skipped that. Voted League of Legends for esports stuff. For the esports stuff I did vote for, I voted for League of Legends. And okay, that is it. So, wow, I've been recording for 50 minutes, so this was definitely longer than my last year's Game of the Year video. That's kind of surprising. I thought this one would be shorter, considering it didn't have the whole Death Stranding controversy, the whole Death Stranding conspiracy theory, and that the whole thing was going to be rigged. You know, if it weren't for the whole Death Stranding conspiracy from last year, I bet a lot of people would suspect it was going to be rigged this year for Last of Us Part 2, but I guess a lot of people that were assuming it to be rigged last year now assume that it's not rigged because of Death Stranding not winning. So that's why they probably aren't talking about Last of Us 2 as much as I thought they would, although it's kind of crazy how many categories Last of Us 2 got nominated in, even in ones that don't really make sense. Game direction makes sense, kind of. Best narrative makes sense. I mean, it's like it's a movie game. Movie game as in, like, it's not based off of a movie, but you know what I mean. It's like the game's trying really hard to be like a movie, which I'm not necessarily a fan of. Art direction, I think, is kind of dumb for it. Score and music, I don't know. I haven't really heard much of the music from it. Audio design, these are all pretty weak candidates. When I say weak candidates, I mean for the category. I don't mean that they're bad games necessarily. Anyways, though, I'm going to wrap that up there. Once again, let me know what you thought. If you would like to let me know what you voted on. What was your game of the year? Or also let me know what you think about these nominees, because obviously, like I said, some of these nominations are a little strange. But with all that said, I will see you all later, and bye for now.